Hey, board gamers! BJ from Board Game Gumbo here, back with episode number 36 of Gumbo Live. Gumbo Live is the #1 Facebook Live talk show dedicated to board gaming. Tony, that's because we're the only Facebook Live talk show dedicated to board gaming. So that's how we hold on to that #1 mantle. But our special guest tonight, Tony Miller of Breaking Into Board Games podcast and the designer of Fire in the Library, out on Kickstarter right now from Weird Giraffe Games. Gumbo Live is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Check out some of the other fine members like the Eternally Bored podcast. Trey Chambers, the designer of Argent the Consortium, and Charles, they talk about more than just gaming. They cover the important issues of board gaming hobbies on every podcast. Plus, Trey knows a little something about Louisiana. That's a New Orleans boy. Punchboard Media, where we all bring something to the table. Hit me up on social media tonight, Twitter @BoardGameGumbo, or on Facebook at facebook.com/BoardGameGumbo. And we'll be looking for your questions on the chat. But that's enough chat. Let's talk to our guest here, Tony Miller, the Bearded Rogue. Man, it's so awesome having you on the show tonight. Welcome to the show.
It's fantastic to be here. I'm really, really excited to be on. Live programming is probably my favorite programming. I really love Meeple Syrup and the Nerd Nighters when they were on Games on the Rocks. And other than last week's episode, which I was told I was not allowed to watch, I've been trying to follow along with you guys too. So.
That's right. Well, welcome to the show. I want to just in case people don't know who you are, and from the way you have blown up on Twitter just the last 2 days, I don't know who that would be or why they'd be watching this particular show, but just in case, give us the quick elevator pitch. I know you're familiar with those, about who you are and what is Breaking Into Board Games.
So I'm Tony Miller. I'm a game designer, and I am 1/3 of the Breaking Into Board Games podcast. Myself, Ian Zhang, and Gil Hova represent designers, publishers, and developers in the industry, and we interview people in the industry about how they got their start, what got them interested in the industry, what got them actually into the industry, and then we usually discuss various topics about the occupations and things that they do, whether they're developers, artists, graphic designers, publishers, distributors. We've had a little bit of everybody on the show. We try to diversify as much as we can because this is a wonderful industry. The board game industry is. It's the most fantastic community I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of. And so we like to shine spotlights on the people in it because they are amazing, and it helps other people get in, and the more the merrier.
Man, Tony, you guys have had just a who's who of all of the big names in the industry. But not only that, it's such a broad spectrum. You've got artists and designers and publishers, and I mean every developers, all the different ones. You and I were talking before. My favorite podcast is, of course, the Dukes of Dice with Sean and Alex, but you guys are probably the best podcast I listen to. It's well produced, it's got great guests, and you really let the guests shine. What is the secret? How do you guys get that?
Well, it kind of comes from how we all started. So we all met at Origins one year. I played every player count of the network's prototype that there was in one weekend. And Ian and I met at speed dating. And the Monday after Origins, Gil on his gilhova.net website dropped a blog post about podcasts. And when he dropped this post, it was talking about how he would run a podcast or how a podcast should be done. Talking about how you should have a professional editor to edit out all the ums and long pauses, how he wasn't interested in what happened on the latest CW shows this week or what beers you were drinking, and how every podcast starts off with, what did we play this week? And just him talking about, in general, in this blog post, how he wanted a podcast that was kind of geared towards people in the industry rather than the casual board gaming fan. And he had some really solid ideas on format. So I get a message on Facebook from Ian saying, hey, do you want to be on a podcast? And I'm like, that's not anything I've ever thought about doing, but, sure, why not? I can talk forever, as anybody who has met me can attest. Little known to me, he was on the other line messaging Gil saying, hey, I really like what you laid out as an idea for a podcast. Would you like to do one? And Gil was like, you know what? I've never done a podcast, and I'm starting my brand new publishing ventures now, and I that probably wouldn't be a bad way to get out and connect with people. So let's do it. And then he brought me and Gil together, and the format that we started with, where everything is kind of the spotlight is on the guests more than anything else, has just kind of stuck. We had, conversations about it ahead of time, and our first episode was like an introduction to us episode. But ever since then, we've tried to keep the number of just us podcasts down to a minimum. But yeah, we want to be, an hour or less so that people can listen to us on their commute. Gil was a professional sound editor in another life, and he still has all of those skills as a sound editor. He just doesn't do it professionally anymore. So he edits a lot of other podcasts as well, in addition to ours. He edited Ludology before he was actually a co-host on Ludology. Right. So, he has those
Board Games
chops.
Insider. Yeah, he does that one also. Yeah.
Yep.
He does have the chops. Hey, this is a live show. BJ from Board Game Gumbo on Gumbo Live here. I've got my guest, Tony Miller. We're going to be talking Fire in the Library. And speaking of that, Jay Peak, who runs a little video channel that does how to bling out your games in your game room, he says Fire in the Library is so hot right now, I'm excited to get my hands on it. There's a backer for you, Tony.
Oh, you aren't the only one who's excited to get their hands on it.
That's true.
Like, I was at Unpub this weekend, and my co-designer John and Karla, our publisher, were there. And Karla had some of the laser-etched wooden bits, the prototype pieces for the deluxe edition. And I got to actually see them in person for the first time. And they are gorgeous. I just cannot wait to have them in my little paws. They're so pretty.
Well, I'm expecting some comments and some questions tonight, and here's one from Dave Dugas, my favorite part of Tuesday nights, Gumbo Live, y'all. There we are. Thank you for checking in, Dave and Jay. So hopefully we'll get some questions about it. And we're going to get to Fire in the Library in just a second, but I do have a question for you. What's on my shelf?
What's on your shelf?
On my shelf, I did this last week with Carla, but on my shelf are 3 games.
Yes.
And they have some relation to Tony Miller tonight. Can you figure out what it is?
Gil is the designer and publisher of Wordsy. Ian did development on Assassin Con, and Beth Sobel did the artwork for Viticulture.
Oh, that was an easy one. Okay, so you got all 3 of those. I figured this one might be the toughest one because that was early in Ian's career when he did development on Assassin Con. Was that a guess or did you know?
No, I knew it. I try to be hyper aware of what other people are up to. Especially if they're my friends. Like, I really love supporting the people who support me. And so I try to do my best to keep all that in mind. There's so many people now that it's hard to do sometimes. But people that are really close to me, like Gil and Ian and Beth, I'm try to keep really solid tabs on what they've been up to. So.
The best game experience that you've had this year, who would you like to... you've been talking Fire in the Library for days and days, but what's the game that you've played this year that you'd want to say, man, I really enjoyed that game?
Well, I would have to be the same game that was number 1 on my list for 2017. We actually finished the campaign this year, and that would be Charterstone.
Okay.
Charterstone was a fantastic experience. We had the same 4 people through the whole campaign. I'm not going to drop a whole bunch of spoilers, but let's just say that it was very interesting to see how things changed and developed over the course of it. And it starts out almost as like your first worker placement game and quickly adds enough meat and complexity for even heavier gamers to actually get something out of it. So I really, really enjoyed it. And the group that I played it with, Tiffany, Kyra's the one tar, her husband Steve, and then our friend John. We started it off and we finished it all the way through. We're planning on doing a 13th episode that we're going to live stream that'll be just full of spoilers. Now that the campaign's complete, I'm interested to play a game with the world we created over the course of our campaign just one more time as a revisit.
Yeah, we're on game 6.
Mhm.
Like you said, the first one was sort of like my first worker placement game. That's cute. I like that. But after that, it's added so many, without going any spoilers, it's added
Yep.
so many things at every play session that we always are excited to go. And then something called Gloomhaven happened, and I lost my Charterstone group as Dave and the rest of them have just it's Gloomhaven has taken over our Sunday night campaign nights. But I think they're getting close to being satiated with Gloomhaven if you ever do. And so hopefully I can get my group back together and we can finish out Charterstone, because I know that there's some negative people out there about it. I've loved every minute of Charterstone from start to finish. I really have.
It's been like, it started off as a very like pleasant, almost like beer and pretzels level experience. Like my brain wasn't burning. I was just along for the ride, and it was great to just be along for the ride. And then as they kept introducing things, it became a little bit more thinky, a little bit more crunchy. Like it never got to like super heavy Euro status, but it was enough to keep my attention and keep me interested. And the just the carrying over of things from game to game became a very interesting discussion, and watching as other people would change their strategies in response to what you did, or what the new end game condition is for the current piece of the campaign that you're on. It was really cool. I really, really dug it.
I don't think in Jamie Stegmaier's sensibilities, and he was on the show, and I should have asked him this, but I don't think in his sensibilities is the same thing that like a Vital Lacerda has, where it's nested actions that are going to just be broad. It almost seems like he's more about the experience of the game rather than all of the different elements, leading up to these consequences at the end. At least all the games that I've played with them, some of them are deep, of course. I mean, Scythe has depth to it. Viticulture has depth to it, but it's not necessarily brain melting. I just don't think that's exactly what he's all about.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he's going for either. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's finding a home with so many gamers and their interests, is that he manages to deliver a solid experience without trying to melt your brain or make you do tons of math. Not that either of those are bad things, mind you, just not what everybody signs up for.
BJ from Board Game Gumbo here, Gumbo Live. I've got Tony Miller here, the bearded rogue, the designer of Fire in the Library. We're going to be talking about it, but I want to get back to the podcast. Gil and Ian, you guys have Breaking Into Board Games, fantastic podcast. Who is your dream guest for that podcast? Besides Dave Duga, of course. I know that would be your number one. So let's say the number 2 guest, if you could get on the Breaking Into Board Games.
So we've had a lot of number ones that have kind of rotated through as we've gone through. Now that TC Petty has finally been on, that was a big one for me.
It was, and a good one.
Because I really, I love the character TC Petty III. And I love the human being, T.C. Petty III. But I'd say right now, my number one is actually a pair or trio of guests, if they would all want to be on. And that's Christopher Bedell, Adam Ribataro, and Paul Bender of Greater Than Games. I would love to have all 3 of them on. Paul typically doesn't do podcasts, so that's why I say 2. Adam and Christopher have their own podcast, The Letters Page, which I absolutely love, but I would love to have those guys on. They are very, very interesting and kind of started themselves off in the industry in a way that a lot of people don't. Hey, look at us. We've got this game. We're a company now. It was just really, it was really inspiring to see them kind of just all 3 friends come together and say, you know what, you're good at accounting, you're good at art, and I'm good at game design. Let's make a game and then, make this the rest of our lives. And they did it. So
the Game Geek Ninja is checking in. Jeremy Davies is going to be on. He's going to be on the podcast on the video next week. He says Sentinels is one of Tony's favorites after all.
Yes, it is one of my top 3 games of all time. So Sentinels is one of my favorite things ever, and I would love to just be able to sit down and have a chat with those guys.
Okay, so you were at Unpub 8, correct?
Yep, correct.
I know you were demoing a lot of games, but did you get to play the game that I can't wait to see, because it started out what I thought was kind of a joke, but apparently is serious, the Maastricht game from TC Petty?
I didn't get to play it, but I hung out at the table while some of my friends played it. I looked over their shoulders and stuff like that. That game is legit. Like, it started off as a joke about, I'm going to make a game about some unknown European city.
Hard to pronounce.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it started off as a joke. That game is legit.
It looks good.
It is good. It is good. I wanted to be able to get in the seat and actually play it myself, and that didn't happen. But I did get to watch a couple of rounds of it, and that's going to be a really good game. You
know what it needs?
What's that?
The Kalis front cover, but with TC Petty.
I would buy that game just for that artwork.
Yeah, just TC for that Petty artwork. With the dour look on his face.
Yes.
Looking down on the city of Maastricht and what is it? It's like lignite or something that lime or something that they produced from their mines, and he's just looking over at the mine, just our European face. Wouldn't that be cool?
I would totally like that artwork. Would make the game for me above and beyond any of the design.
All right, BJ from Board Game Gumbo Live. I've got Tony Miller, the designer of Fire in the Library. I had Karla Kopp on last week from Weird Giraffe Games. That was her second time on the show. I love Karla. I got to play. I actually convinced her to play a giant crazy party game called Galapagos with Jeremy and Nick and a bunch of other people at a Gen Con last year. I saw you running around, but I never got a chance to say hello. I saw you running with Karla and them a couple of times, but we had such a good time with Karla last week. I want to know, though, she's talked a little bit about the game, but I didn't get into the inspiration. What was the inspiration for Fire in the Library?
So Fire in the Library is kind of twofold as far as inspiration goes. So the first piece is me scrolling through my social media and coming across a image that shows a very beautiful oil painting of a man in a library, and the text says, "You know that you're a book geek if you're still angry about the fire in the Library of Alexandria." And in that moment, as soon as I read that, I realized that I am maybe the biggest book geek ever. It was something that, like, immediately it flashed into my head, like, why are there no games about libraries? Why are there no games about Alexandria? Now, since I started having that brain flash, there are games about libraries. There are games about Alexandria. But that was the initial, like, catalyst, was like, wow, okay, yeah, no, there isn't anything like that. And then later on came the mechanism. So I was gearing up for Unpub 2 years ago, actually, Unpub 6. And all of my games were in a condition that I thought was good enough to test. And I had some time, and I was like, what are we going to do? I had been on a long car trip with my wife to go visit family for the holidays. And we talk on big long car trips, and she indulges me in talking about mechanisms and themes and stuff like that. And I had this idea for a pressure luck game that I wanted to do that involved drawing stuff out of a bag. Who doesn't love drawing stuff out of a bag?
True.
There are quite a few people.
One of my favorite mechanics in the game.
I personally love it. It's one of my favorite things ever. I love it in Orleans. I love it in Clank. Doesn't matter. If I'm drawing stuff out of a bag, I'm having a good time.
Sure.
So I was trying to think of how to turn this into a pressure luck game. I love pressure luck games. Can't Stop, Ink and Gold, all of them are, even No Thanks to some extent, or Coloretto are pressure luck games. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's actually right here.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, Celestia. That was the game at Gen Con 2 years ago. We played it nonstop the entire Gen Con.
Yeah. I played it back when it was Cloud 9, and then when they released it with gorgeous artwork and stuff, I had to have a copy. But yeah, I love pressure luck games. And so I wanted to design a pressure luck game, but I couldn't come up with any kind of a theme. So I had all these mechanisms where you're pulling stuff out of a bag and trying to figure out themes for it. And there were some horrible themes. Like, I want to design a 10 to 15 minute pressure luck game, and you can't put a heavy theme on top of that. Like, that'll just kill it. And so, like, I had, I had, like, rescuing people out of a hospital. If you fail, that's a real bummer. Like, that will kill the mood faster than anything. Like, zoo animals, nobody wants to be responsible for that not working
The baby
out.
animals, you're killing the baby seals. No,
exactly.
Don't do that.
Like, no heavy themes like that. So I couldn't come up with a theme. So I'm talking to my wife, and I'm like, I've got this cool mechanism wherein things get more valuable as time goes on, as you're pulling these things out of the bag, so that the final rounds are worth more than the earlier rounds. But I can't figure out what kind of theme to attach to it. And like, the conversation, and I design best in conversations. The conversation kind of resolved with, well, what's something that's really valuable that you wouldn't, like, it wouldn't be the end of the world if you lost it. It would still be tragic. It would still kind of sting, but like, nobody's dead. And the conversation turned to books, at which point, like, the theme and the mechanics just gelled in my head, and it was like, okay, that's what this game is about. This is a pressure luck game about trying to rescue books from a library. Just trying to give people access to a way to have agency about the fire in the Library of Alexandria, because originally that was the theme. It was based in Alexandria, in that library. Since signing with Karla, we've kind of abstracted it away from that for a couple of reasons that are very, very valid. One of which is Alexandria the game came out, and while the mechanisms of the games are absolutely nothing alike, there's a lot of overlap in theme there. So we moved away from that, and also so that the tools and various other implements that you can use in your quest to rescue books from the library weren't as tied down to one specific time or place. We had more freedom in not just creating the base content, but also future expansions if we wanted to do that. It didn't have to all be ancient Egypt. It could be anything. It could be magical. It could be Karla wants to do a menagerie expansion, which I think would be very entertaining, where you're using animals to help you rescue these books. So, yeah, just
BJ,
open up more room.
Yeah, plenty. BJ from Board Game Gumbo here, Gumbo Live. I've got Tony Miller, the designer of Fire in the Library, coming out. We got a couple people checking in. Steve O'Rourke, the name father from the Dukes of Dice, says, "Hey, BJ and Tony, looking forward to a Gumbo that's better than my fantasy draft." Yeah, didn't sound like he did too good. He drafted Wade Boggs. Not a good idea in today's society. We also have Anna Maria Jackson Phelps says, "Hey, I got to play Fire in the Library with Carla this weekend. I'm super stoked to add it to my game shelf. Great game." Hey, look, the reviews tonight. You're getting some good pub here.
Unpub was amazing. Karla was running Fire in the Library at her table, and I ran, I don't even know, 6-7 games of it after hours from just people who were interested and wanted to check it out. And it was so cool to be at the center of that amount of buzz of people wanting to check out the game. Wow. And all of the feedback was positive. It was very, very well received. We couldn't have been happier. Myself, John, and Karla walked away from Unpub absolutely sure that we'd done a good job and that people were really going to like this game once it's in their hands.
Speaking of Karla, we talked last week at Karla and we told you not to watch.
I did not watch.
Because I'm curious. I want to know what are the best things about working with Karla? What has been the best thing about working with her on this project?
So the best thing about working with Karla is kind of twofold. One, it's that she has a very clear vision or direction for how she wants to go about things. This is very, very useful to have in a developer. Because she also did that as well as publish.
Right.
She very clearly stated, this is the game we're going to make. At which point, all John and I had to do was turn that game into the best game we could.
Okay.
It was no longer trying to figure out what a publisher might be interested in or what will hook somebody. We had somebody who was totally on board and was like, yep, this is what we're doing. And then they set us loose. Like,
so kind of the weight's off your shoulders. You know the direction that you're going. The experimentation is still a little bit there, but it's all going in one direction.
Yes, right? And the experimentation is the other part of it. This is John and I's first signed game. This is the first time we've signed with a publisher, the first time we've worked with a publisher to bring a game out. We've worked on several designs, probably 50 at this point, but this was the first one that somebody said, yeah, let's do this. And this is the first game that Karla has signed as a publisher. All of her previous games are her own designs, which are fantastic games. But it was new territory for her, and it was new territory for us. And because she's a fairly small company still at this point, although becoming larger by the minute, and we were brand new designers as far as that goes, there was no preconceived notion of how it was supposed to work. It was literally just three people who want to do the absolute best job they can on the game that they're working on. And so, like, sometimes what I did straight into development territory, sometimes what she did straight into design territory. Like, there were no, like, little boxes that we were stuck in. We were able to just work with each other and produce the best game that we could, regardless of what that meant we had to do. So.
BJ from Weird Game Gumbo checking in with Tony Miller about his work with Karla. The question I have for you, though, following that is, what would Karla say? What do you think Karla said was the best and worst things about working together on Fire in the Library?
The best thing?
What would she say?
I don't know what she would say is the best thing about working together. I think probably that John and I are not confrontational. Like, yes, it was our baby, but there was never a point where there was like a fight about anything. Like, it was very much like a collaborative effort from the very beginning. So like, if I'd say that just allowing her to be in charge also, like, she's the publisher, she's the developer, she's the one who calls the shots. So neither one of us had a problem with that at all. Oh yeah, she absolutely does playtest like crazy, Jeremy. That's absolutely accurate.
I think she said, you know what? I think Tony's going to say, I love to playtest. And I think she like that.
She playtests like nobody else. And in the first week that we were signed with her, between us playtesting and her playtesting, I think that we had at least 50 games in a week. We iterated 4 times in a week. The wording, the verbiage, the structure of everything. Yeah.
I threw up a picture here for the viewers. I think this is a picture of you guys playtesting.
Yes, this was shortly after Gen Con and us officially signing the game. She came to Portland, and this is actually Guardian Games in Portland.
Is that your friendly local game store?
It's one of them. Portland is blessed with multiple fantastic game stores, but this is the biggie, as it were. This is the big one, and we went up there to play some games, and it was really, really good. Just the initial playtesting and stuff. This was basically all of the playtesting that we had kind of culminated together, and testing and iterating to make sure that we had one version that we would go forward with from there.
How close is the game to what I'm showing on the screen right now? Has this moved from that point? Has there been a lot of changes since you signed the game?
There have been some changes since we signed the game. What's on the screen is actually pretty close. The major changes that came after the signing of the game were changes that John and I were already kind of looking to implement, and that we'd been talking to Karla about because she was familiar with the game. The tool deck, for example. When the game was signed, all players had the same 4 tools that they could use over the course of the game. And playtesting at Origins this past year made it clear that while that worked, it wasn't quite as fun as something a little bit more random. And so we introduced more tools. The first thing Karla did was help us brainstorm a whole bunch of additional tools, some of which still aren't in the game as of yet. They're sitting somewhere in an expansion file waiting for us to determine when we want to put them in or how they tie together with other things.
I've thrown out some pictures of some of those tools. In fact, if I remember right, and Jerry can correct me, he said that's what really launched the game at that next stratosphere. The addition of the tools and the refinement of the tools and what you guys can do with the tools as they developed really kicked it into high gear. Now, the artwork, I think, from Beth is going to help that also.
Oh, absolutely.
Although Jeremy said that library card is a little old-fashioned, kind of an old-fashioned library card.
Yes.
And Jeremy would know, he's a librarian.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, do you agree that the tools and the development of you and John and Karla working on those tools have really kicked up the game up another notch?
Yes. Definitely in terms of what Karla's vision for the game was. There are some, like, when we signed, there were some other directions that we could have gone in. However, the tools are what really grabbed her from the beginning. That was she probably said this on the podcast. I don't know because I didn't listen, but she isn't a big fan of pressure luck games. And one of the reasons why she brought us on board is because she wasn't going to design a press your luck game herself.
That's
and we had a press your luck game that she actually liked playing. So one of the things that she doesn't like about press your luck games is the lack of luck mitigation. And tools are that. The tools in the game allow for very tactical and strategic luck mitigation that gives the players a little bit more. It puts their hands on the wheel as a little bit more as far as where they're going in the course of the game. And so it was something that she really liked and that she really wanted to emphasize. And so we did. And I think it turned out really, really well. I'm very, very happy with it.
What was your elevator pitch? If you were trying to sell this game to some of the viewers tonight who haven't played it, maybe Steve O'Rourke or something. I mean, how would you synopsis that?
So Fire in the Library is a pressure luck game where strategic use of the tools and the variable turn order in the game are going to do more to determine your success than random chance.
And how many players does it play?
It plays 1 to 6. So you can play with a group of up to 6, or you can just play it by yourself.
Are you a big fan of solo games? Is that something that you do a lot?
I like solo games. I play them not all the time, but I play them quite a bit. Friday is one of my favorite games of all time. So I play that one a lot. I like Onirim as well. Solo games are something that I definitely do and I enjoy. And one of the things that Karla and Weird Giraffes is very serious about is making sure that solo games are something that exists, or solo modes at least, are something that exists for all of their games. And so she is the primary creator of the solo mode for this one. She had John and I help tweak it and stuff, in which case she was more of the designer and we were more the developers of the solo mode. Like I said, we each wore a lot of different hats and none of us had a whole bunch of ego wrapped up in it. So
Steve says, thank you. Having a solo option is a key. Thank you, Tony.
Absolutely. Thank Karla, more so than me, but I'm very glad that it's in there. I always wanted it to be in there, and we just hadn't gotten around to it. We were trying to get the core game working, and the solo game doesn't play that much differently than the core game. It's actually a little bit faster because the opponent in the solo game doesn't take turns. It's as simple as flipping a card, and then that creates all of the challenge. It determines what the solo AI both scores and how much of the library burns down. So it creates your timer and the obstacle that you're up against.
All right. Is there room in the design space for expansions?
Absolutely. We're already looking at additional sets of tools that would create slightly different experiences. We're looking at something that would be more... we're looking at an expansion that potentially introduces wild books to the library. They would basically count as the lowest point scoring books there, but would allow you to choose which sections of the library burn when they burn. And then a set of tools along with them that also allows for more manipulation of the library clock, as it were. Karla's Menagerie expansion that we've been working on the various animals for is a whole new set of tools that has more of a almost take that element to it, which is really cool. At Unpub, Karla sat in on one of Matt Leacock's panels, the father of cooperative games,
Right.
in a big way. And we really see a way now that we could potentially create a cooperative expansion for Fire in the Library to take it in that direction as well. So there's all sorts of...
When you hear the theme, it does
Yes.
kind of sound like a cooperative game would be a good next step, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There are some people who are somewhat confused as to why it isn't, and who doesn't want to be the best librarian. I mean, yes, we're all in this to save books, and that's going to be something that we're going to be looking at here very shortly.
Well, let's be careful. Jeremy knows her well, and he says Karla's probably going to be adding dinosaurs.
That's already been discussed. There's already an opportunity for dinosaurs to be added. So it's even come up in the comments on the Kickstarter.
So last week we were doing a little game with Karla where we had the audience pick the favorite games that involve something to do with books themes, okay. Right? So everybody's throwing out things like, what do you think? What's some of the suggestions?
Well, Ex Libris, obviously.
Ex Libris is the winner.
I'm sure Alexandria came up at some point.
Alexandria, Wordsy, a bunch of games like that. And of course, the host, I was trying to gin the results, and so I threw out, I think, Dinosaur Island.
Fantastic.
Only because Karla loves dinosaurs, and I figured she'd pick it. And she said, okay, now wait a minute. I don't understand how Dinosaur Island has anything to do with books. And I said, it's a theme park. And it's got a gift shop, and in every gift shop that I've ever been to at a theme park, they have what? They have the little guidebooks, right?
Yeah. I think I would have sold that as a Jurassic Park tie-in. Jurassic Park was a pretty big book, and
a book. Yeah, that's true. And I did read that book. So.
I think if I was going to try to sell it to Karla, that's how I would have done it. I don't know that it would have won. I don't think that would have necessarily enhanced my chances. But
all right, so Fire in the Library is number one. What would be your second favorite game of all time that involves books, that has something to do with books?
Well, right now, considering that I demoed it for probably 20 to 30 hours at Gen Con, and then again when I got home recorded about a 40-minute video about everything that I think is clever in the design and production of it, I would say Ex Libris.
Wow.
It doesn't
you
shock
really
me
like Ex Libris.
I love Ex Libris. I love that game. Absolutely love that game.
Have you read every title on every card yet?
No, I have not read every title on every card. However, oh yes, being able to do demos gave me an opportunity to read a lot of them, because I was able to just let people play and then be on standby to answer questions, and so I got to read a lot of the cards that were just sitting in the discard pile. So that was really fun. I love that the strategy guide to Ex Libris is one of the books on the shelves in Ex Libris.
I've seen that one.
I love that one.
Hey, so Wednesday you're teaching the game, right, at Gen Con?
Yeah.
Probably took you 5 or 10, 15 minutes to explain the game. How long was it taking you on Saturday and Sunday? How short of a time was it to get people started?
I don't know. Probably about... There are some people who demoed with me who could probably tell you better, but I know it was less than 10 minutes. Yep. By far less than 10 minutes. Go ahead. The way that the board in that game is set up with the actual end goals of the game written on it so that you know how you score because it's written right there in front of you gave me a really easy framework to teach that game. It's literally, these are the things that the game wants you to do. They're printed right here. If you have any questions, this is where you look.
It's true.
The hardest part was reading out all of the room abilities because it's hard to see across a table. That's my only problem with that game.
If there's a complaint of that game, that is what it's been.
Yep.
When I've taught the game, you have to absolutely pay. And of course, the way Adam has it set up, each round you're cycling in rooms that come in and come out, and everybody has to stop and check out those rooms because a room could pop in and it changes the entire complexity of what you're doing that round. But it's such a good game. I really like Ex Libris. I'm glad to see that you were doing it. And you did that all week for those guys at Renegade?
Yeah. I was in Renegade's demo area, so I did some demoing of Clank and Space, but 90% of what I did was Ex Libris because I love that game.
I was there. I went on my break. I was demoing at a different booth, but Alex was teaching flip ships, and somebody else is teaching Clink in Space. I must have just missed you because I walked through that booth a couple of times. But
I was actually in the demo hall, in the open space hall. Yeah, so people were playing whole games out there. So we were getting them started and then letting them play through the whole game and then starting the next group. We also ran a Clank tournament that went on all weekend. So as somebody who had only played Clank once before the weekend, I became very, very adept and knowledgeable about Clank.
Are you a fan?
Oh yeah, I love Clank. Okay. I think I prefer Clank in Space.
It does have a bag, and you can grab stuff out of the bag.
Yeah, that's part of it. But no, I like Clank in Space a little bit better, both because the sci-fi references are hilarious, which is something that the original game doesn't have. The original game is very, I won't say vanilla fantasy, but like it's not deliberately referencing historical fantasy things.
There's a few if you look in there, but you're right. The sci-fi one is much better.
It's very overt, very overt in its references, and I really enjoy that.
I'd love to talk to Paul Denon about it and see if he thinks, man, we missed an opportunity. We should have added more of that wink wink stuff in the base Clank, because it's all over Clank in Space.
Oh yeah. Everywhere. From Voltron lions to furry smugglers to random anime references. It's so much stuff in there.
That reminds me of a question. I didn't put it on the show notes, but I had wanted to ask you. I knew that you're a book lover. You talked about it on a podcast recently. Mm-hmm. What if you could do any book out there, any IP from a book, and design a game? You could just wave your wand and say, you know what, this is the game I'm going to design. I'm just going to talk to this author, and he's going to agree to it, or she's going to agree to it. What would it be? Do you know?
Yes, actually. If I could design a game for any author's world, for any world that was created by an author, I would want to do a game set in Matthew Woodring Stover's dystopian future that is in the books Heroes Die, Blade of Tishal, Cain Black Knife. That series, the Acts of Cain series, is probably my favorite series of all time. It's both sci-fi and fantasy. In a very interesting way. Basically, the main character lives in a dystopian future where the Earth is kind of gone to pot, and the primary means of entertainment is that they send people to another dimension that's a lot like a J.R.R. Tolkien fantasy world, and record all of their experiences like VR that you can then play back. So you've got this like dystopian caste system future, and then you've got in the other reality, he's a the most feared assassin in the land. So, but he's an actor, and he's doing this to draw ratings.
Would this be cooperative, competitive? What are you thinking?
There's so many different pieces of the world that exist. I think probably what I would do is I would create a competitive game based on the gangs of criminals that exist in the primary city in the fantasy world. The main capital is kind of like carved up by 4 different gangs that each control their own sections and each have their own ways of doing things. And I would probably do something like that. Maybe an area control game or something of that nature involving the criminal gangs taking over the city.
Man, I'm not familiar with it. It's Matthew Clark?
Matthew Woodring Stover.
Matthew Woodring Stover. I'm intrigued. That sounds like an awesome series.
He actually did a lot of Star Wars novelizations before they wiped away the expanded universe. He also did the novelization for Episode 3 and a novel about Mace Windu called Shatterpoint. That's really, really good. But
I'm gonna have to check that out. BJ from Board Game Gumbo. I've got here on Gumbo Live. I've got Tony Miller, the Bearded Rogue from Breaking Into Board Games and the designer of Fire in the Library. Tony, what is your con schedule for 2018? When people want to visit with you, maybe chat with you, where are you going to be this year?
So Unpub is over. That was a really good place to see me. You will probably see me there every year, so just keep in mind you'll see the Bearded Rogue at Unpub. I'm going to be at Origins this year. That's the next major con on my schedule. There are a couple smaller local things here in Portland and maybe in Seattle that I'll be attending, but Origins is the next big one. Right now, I'm not planning on attending Gen Con.
Whoa. Okay.
That's subject to change if a publisher needs me there or some other circumstance requires that I be there. But Gen Con isn't really my scene so much.
It's crazy.
Yes. So I'm a very social person, and I like to talk, and I like to play games with people. And Gen Con doesn't really allow me to do any of those things.
Right.
Gen Con allows me to see everybody I want to see for maybe 5 minutes and wave at them as they go off to do whatever's next. And that's not really, I don't know. That's just not really why I go to cons. So
come hang out with me and Jeremy at night at the Envoy booth, man. We'll play games. You play with games with us all night.
I was gonna say it's really cool to see all the new stuff and everything, but if you're not going there to just buy all the new things, then
right.
We
like playing. What is your favorite con as a gamer versus a favorite con as media industry, board game, in other words, as a business?
Okay, so my favorite con as a gamer by far is BGG Con.
Oh, are you going in the fall?
Yes. Okay. I play more games at BGG Con than I play in the rest of the year, is basically how that works. Yep. Because I can just sit down and play game after game after game after game after game, and I have nowhere to be. There's no booth to run. There's no big lines to get through. There's no crush of people or anything like that. It's just a whole bunch of people who are there to play games, enjoy games, and talk about games. And so as a gamer, BGG Con is the absolute best. As far as industry type stuff, as far as being a designer, I really like Origins. Unpub is really great for testing games. Origins is really great for pitching games.
Okay.
Lots of the major publishers are there because it's still a decently major-sized con. It's not Gen Con big, which means that they're not too busy to talk to you. You can get meetings on the calendar, even if you are brand name designer who has never published anything. There's plenty of time at Origins. And now that Origins, as of last year, has added the Unpub room, it has an area for playtesting in it as well. So I can get a little bit of Gen Con in the sales floor. I can get a little bit of Unpub in the Unpub room, and I can get a little bit of BGG Con in all of the time after hours playing games with people. So it's kind of a mix of all of them.
I love the cons that focus on playing games. At Dice Tower Con, in one day, I played more than I played the entire times I've been to Gen Con, and that was in one day. Yep. So yeah, hopefully we can. Hopefully I can make BGG Con, and maybe I can catch you out there. Hey, the last thing we'd like to do here on Gumbo Live is Playable Game. It's a board gaming podcast, right?
Yeah.
So the game is called the Envie Game. This is how it works. I want you to think of a game. Envie is a little Cajun word that just means a jonesing or a hankering for something, right? Real strong desire. So think of that game out there. Don't tell us, though. Don't tell us. We're going to try to guess it from you. What game right now, if you were not if the podcast ended right now and you could go play a game with your dream lineup of people, it doesn't even have to be a game you own. It could be a game just out there in the wild that you haven't played yet, or a game that you love. What game would it be if you could do it right now? So think about it, and if you've got a game in your mind.
Okay.
You got something?
Yep.
All right. Okay, good. So we're going to ask some questions, roughly about 20 questions. Hopefully we can figure it out. If we can't, you win. But Steve O'Rourke and Jeremy and these guys are pretty good. So let's see if we can figure it out. They may throw questions out there, but my question is going to be about 20. And when I get to that at the end, I'll take a guess. And if I haven't figured it out, Tony Miller is the winner, as he usually does on Breaking Into Board Games, because it seems like you win on that almost every week. All right. So first question, is it a competitive or cooperative game?
It is competitive.
American or European designer? I'm going to guess American.
Yes.
It is an American designer?
Yes, it is.
All right, good. I wasn't sure because, there's so many good Asian games that are coming out from China and Japan and South Korea and all these places.
Speaking of which.
What you got? What you got for us? Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yeah, I just got these in the mail. So, yes, there are a lot of great games coming out of Asia.
I can't wait. Mystery of the Temples. I don't know if you've played it yet. I love that game.
I am super excited about it.
Out on Kickstarter right now. Board-based or card-based?
Card-based.
Card-based. And on a pad, I should have known that because on a podcast you said you're a card gamer at heart.
Yes, I love card games. I don't know what it is about cards versus any other component, but there's something about cards that just speaks to me.
Ameritrash, Euro, or hybrid? Man, which one would it be there, Tony?
That's a tough one. I'm trying to think of how to actually characterize this game under one of those. Like, card game is the best description of it.
If that's the best, we'll go with that.
I'm trying to think.
Let's switch it up.
Go ahead.
Is it thematic or abstract? I would imagine it's thematic, right? It's got a nice little theme to it.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Don't really consider it Euro style.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
Correct.
Hey, did it come out in the last 3 years? Is it a recent game?
Yes and no.
So it came out and then came back.
Mm-hmm.
Republished in the last 3 years?
I don't know if it was the last 3 years, but it's recent.
Okay.
Recently.
So it's been republished recently, but is it a game that came out before the 3 years before?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So yes and no. I'm going to assume it doesn't have any miniatures, right? No miniatures.
That is correct. No miniatures.
Does it play only 2 players? Is it only a 2-player game?
Yes.
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 Ooh, that threw me off now. Oh, Jeremy, Steven, I'm not sure about that one. It only plays 2 players.
Mm-hmm.
And it just came back out. Wow. That may stump me there. So it's not a legacy game. Oh, you know what? Let's try to think of a theme. Is it it's an American designer. Is it space themed?
Not really.
Not really. Fantasy themed?
No.
No. Yeah, Steve O'Rourke says, wow. And Steve is good at this game. He has won a lot. But you are let's see. Is it IP based?
No. Well, sort of. Internal IP.
So it has its own IP that we would recognize as an IP?
Yes.
Is it Legend of the Five Rings?
No.
No. Okay. So John Newman says, hey, is the playing time less than 30 minutes? Is it a short game?
It can be, but not usually.
Tony, this is diabolical.
It can be as short as 1 turn, but
like Magic the Gathering?
not Magic.
That can be 1 turn.
It can.
A card game.
You're thinking along the right lines, though.
I am? Okay.
Yeah, you've kind of near missed on either side of it. So,
well, Ashes has kind of its own IP. Are you an Ashes fan?
I do like Ashes. That is not this particular game, but I do like that game.
Oh, sure. 2-player only. That's what's man, Steve, you got anything out there? Is there a combat theme?
Not really. It's not really combat.
Not really combat. Oh, man. Oh, Jeremy's got to go in Neuroshima Hex.
That's a good guess, but no.
And that would be, well, that wouldn't be really science. That would be more science fiction. That would be more apocalyptic. Jeremy says Ascension. Is it Ascension?
Nope.
Man. Oh, let's see. Let's see. Maybe some publishers, Steve. Maybe some publishers would help us out here. Who is it? A Fantasy Flight?
Yes.
Oh, okay, guys. Now, come on. We've circled the wagons here. Fantasy Flight. Star Wars Destiny?
Nope.
Nope. Not Legend of the Five Rings and not Star Wars Destiny?
Nope.
Man, what? Yeah, Steve, it's come back recently. Has to help us. What has? Android Netrunner?
You got it.
What?
there.
No way!
Right there
Oh,
on the
look,
shelf.
look, he's got it behind there. I'm gonna solo in there. Let me see that. There it is, Android Netrunner. So you're a big Netrunner guy.
Yes,
Wow.
I love Netrunner. I absolutely love Netrunner.
I wish Carlos was watching the show. Carlos in the board game Gumbo, he was a huge fan. Every Monday night he had his little Netrunner crew, and they couldn't wait for the next set to come out. And I've never tried the game.
I absolutely love it. I love everything about it. I love Fantasy Flight's re-implementation of it. The original Wizards of the Coast version was okay, but the restrictions and constraints that Fantasy Flight introduced on deck building with the different factions and the card limits and everything made it a much, much better game. I
should have known, though, because you said the IP is kind of internal, and they've come out with other games. Los Angeles, is that the name of it?
It actually started with this one here,
New Angeles. Yeah,
yes, New Angeles. Yes,
that's based. And when I was playing New Angeles with Carlos said, "Man, I wish you had played Android because all of the references in the game, it's all in there." Really did a good job.
I loved the original Android game. It gets a lot of flack for being too long or being too sprawling or odd. I really like it. It is a really long game and it is a bit clumsy mechanically in parts, but like the world that was created, the whole cyberpunk sci-fi future with the space elevator going to the moon and everything. Like I love that world, and I always wanted a role-playing game set in that world.
Do you still have your old Android? What is it? It used to be called just Netrunner, right? The old game.
Yeah, the original game was Netrunner. And,
was that Richard Garfield also, or was that only Vampire?
Yes, that's Richard Garfield, American designer, and it existed before and came back recently.
You're right. I remember I was into Magic back in '94 and '95, and I remember Netrunner and Vampire coming out. I tried Vampire, and there was a Star Wars game also that had come out around that time. In fact, man, we tried all this. I'm sure you were the same way. When CCG started coming out, we played Wyvern by Mike Fitzgerald. We played the Gettysburg game. I mean, if it had a CGG, we wanted to try it, but we never tried Netrunner, and it did look good though.
Yeah, it was very cool. The first one to really hook me was the Game of Thrones CCG.
I never played that.
I'm a big George R.R. Martin fan, and so I played the Game of Thrones CCG all the way up until it became an LCG. And then I kind of dropped out because all my cardboard became useless.
I want to read George R.R. Martin. My problem is that I probably only have about 25 years left to live, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to finish if he'll finish the series.
I read the first book when I was in high school, as this fine man will tell you. I have been waiting a while for it to be finished.
You know what it reminds me of? I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, B. Dalton Booksellers. Do you remember those guys?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I went to the Alexandria Mall, a little small town north of here, and we were Christmas shopping right after I got married. And there was the B. Dalton. I would always wander around while my wife was shoe shopping. And I'm looking for another good fantasy book. And I picked up this thing called The Dragon Reborn. I forgot. Eye of the World, I think was the first one. And I walked up to the counter and I said, "Man, what do you think of this?" Because the guy I knew, I'd shopped there before. He's like, "Don't buy this book." I was like, "What do you mean don't buy this book?" He said, "There's only 3 volumes, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "It's going to be 15, 16, maybe 20 by the time this guy finishes the story. You're going to die before he finishes the story." And he wasn't right, but he was close. I mean, Brandon Sanderson just finished it up a couple of years ago. And that was, 20 years ago when the book series started.
Yeah, he was sort of right. The person who was writing it died before he finished it. So unfortunately, that's one of those fears with Song of Ice and Fire at this point as well, and has been for a while.
Every time I see George R.R. Martin or Pat Rothfuss at a con, I just want to shake him and say, "Why are you here? Go finish."
I leave him alone as somebody who works on creative endeavors. Like sometimes that extra added pressure can just crush your ability to do anything. And Pat has found a lot of other ways to channel his goodwill and positive influence into the world with all of his charity work and stuff. And, George isn't sitting around in a hot tub with bikini babes sipping Mai Tais or anything either. No. But it is one of those things like, you started this gigantic thing and there's almost a promise of it getting to some eventual conclusion, and everybody's waiting for the fulfillment of that promise. So it's kind of a good problem to have people really like hanging on what your next work will be, and at the same time it's a bit dangerous. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
Well, now you know the feeling. People are excited about your game coming out, and they're going to be like, when's the next Tony Miller extravaganza coming out, right?
That is a darn good question. I can't answer it right now. Just know that it will happen. I'm not going to stop.
Well, all right, board gamers, that is it for another episode of Gumbo Live. Man, I want to thank my guest, Tony Miller. That was awesome. I really enjoyed visiting with you, and I do appreciate the book recommendation. I'm going to check that out. Tony Miller, Breaking into Board Games, the designer of Fire in the Library. Hey, it's out on Kickstarter right now. Go support the project. Weird Giraffe Games, Karla, everybody associated with this project, they're all good. Hey, Tony, how can people reach you if they want to get in touch with you?
The easiest way to reach me by far is to just look for Bearded Rogue on Twitter. I am on Twitter almost 24 hours a day, so you can find me there quite easily.
Make sure to like our Facebook page, facebook.com/BoardGameGumbo. It helps us get the word out about all of our upcoming guests and shows, including Jeremy the Game Geek Ninja is back next week, and the week after, we've got Justin Jacobson from Restoration Games, who's going to be talking Fireball Island.
Fireball
Island. Got some great shows next couple of weeks. Hey, I'm BJ from Board Game Gumbo. And until next time, Tony, laissez-le bon temps rouler.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.